The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
Okay, let's talk about this for a second. See, you start off by giving this excerpt, and you might want to transcribe it into regular type if your students are the ones that complain about cursive. But you start off by giving this to your students and asking them, so what is Abigail Adams requesting of her husband? Remember the ladies. Yes, and that's actually what this letter is known as, the Remember the Ladies letter. Yes, remember the ladies when?
When they're coming up with laws and government.
When he's creating the laws for the new laws.
Yes, yes. So why would she make such a request at this time? And this is March 31st, 1776.
This is when they're writing the Declaration and they're all sitting in the Congress and they're all debating and figuring out what they're going to be adding to the Declaration.
It's like, let's put it in for the ladies now instead of later.
Right. And John Adams will be one of 5 people on a committee to draft the Declaration of Independence. Of course, Thomas Jefferson will do most of the work. He'll bring it in, and then Ben Franklin, Roger Sherman, some other dude, John Adams, they're going to edit it, and then it goes to the Congress. Yes, and not just in the Declaration of Independence, but also in the Constitution that's going to follow. You know, what's going to become law of the land. So this is a very sensitive time. Nobody knows what this country is going to be like. They've only just gotten to the point where they can conceive of it as another country, right? And a lot of people still haven't even wrapped their minds around that yet. So it's really weird for us to think that America could have turned out so many other ways, and this is the point at which it could have gone of many ways. So how does she argue her case? Which is a good lesson in showing students how you construct an argument and how you support your request and that kind of thing.
She's really careful with her use of verbiage here. Independency, tyrants, rebellion.
Yes. So why are these words going to be significant to John Adams at this time?
Because they feel like using King George.
Yeah, these are the exact same words that John Adams and his crew are using against England. So that's very smart.
Yet at the same time, she brings it to a place where she says it's inherent in all men's nature. She does.
Now I always picture her as kind of gently, slyly winking at him a little bit, because obviously they are good friends and he respects her intelligence and her advice very greatly. And so it's kind of like, oh yeah, even you can be a tyrant, you who are not as tyrannical as a lot of other people. But yeah, inherent in the nature of man. You give them power, they will take as much as they can. Which kind of is the story of history. Is how do you ever get any kind of advances in history? It's not given to you. Power is not ceded. Power is fought for by the people who don't have any. And so it's never just like, oh, the government's just going to give women the right to vote. Yeah, it does seem like that if you look at the 19th Amendment, but how does it get pressured to do that? So that is a really nice tone to set. in terms of looking at all of the United States history. How are women going to be talking about their rights in the context of the larger rights that we have set forth as the ideals for our country? So I'm not going to pass out everything involved in this lesson idea, but we do have a lot of links to resources that you as teachers can use for your own background before you do this in class, or if you have, you know, maybe older students or advanced students, then you can also pass these out to them. I am going to, however, just give you, we might not have time to like talk about all the stuff in it. There is, this is going to go one to each table. A timeline that's available through a website called the National Women's History Alliance, which is a nice website for giving women, you know, what it sounds like, national women's history. So this is a timeline of the legal history of women in the United States. And so again, this is providing kind of context, and you can kind of see at what point her letter comes in and how that fits into the larger story of women gaining more rights through the legal means. After you talk about Abigail Adams, then you fill in with some more context from the timeline. And then we're actually going to skip over the first half of the 19th century for the purpose of today's activity and talk about the Seneca Falls Convention. So we're going to skip in time to 1848. But this timeline is to show you that it's not like nothing happens between Abigail Adams' letter and the Seneca Falls Convention. Obviously, we know that you don't get a Seneca Falls Convention without movement and meetings and agitation. And so we learned about some of that from Dr. Bond just a while ago, and how this is tied up with the abolitionist movement. How can we talk about freedom in America if we're just talking about it for one segment of society? That doesn't make sense. So in the Library of Congress, and I'm getting one to each table, there is a great feature, if you haven't used it already, called Today in History. And you can find a lot of stories described in Today in History on the day in history. And so looking at July the 19th, they have a little write-up on the Seneca Falls Convention. And what I love about Today in History is if you only have 10 minutes to look at something right before class, this is a good one to do. Because not only do you have a really nice short blurb summary, but you have primary sources, and you have links to related things too that you can look at. So what is the Seneca Falls Convention, by the way?
It's the first organized meeting to talk about women's rights in the United States.
Okay, so it's for the purpose of talking about women's rights. Okay, and now who's there? Who's the only African American man there, by the way? Yeah, we just learned that, right? Frederick Douglass is there. Who else is there? Elizabeth Cady Stanton? Lucretia Mott? Her husband, yes. So there are men there too, right? And what is it that they accomplish? Like, obviously they have a larger goal, but what do they accomplish during this convention? Now, whenever you have like gigantic committees, what is it that committees are supposed to do? Well, they produce reports, right? So what does this convention produce?
That declaration, or did they have it before?
The Declaration
For
of
women's rights and
Sentiments. The Declaration of Sentiments. And this is going to this is what you do when you are agitating for something. You have to state what it is you're agitating for. You have to state your case. So that's kind of what Abigail Adams just did in her private letter to her husband. This is a lot of women and some men doing the same thing on a national scale. So most of this activity is going to involve your students reading excerpts from the Declaration of Sentiments and picking it apart. And so when you go to this lesson idea online, you can click on the link and it'll take you to the worksheets that you all are going to be using. So these are already done. You don't have to copy and paste anything. So first of all, we're going to have you all read excerpt 1 quietly, individually. And then, because I think this is a really good practice for students, you read it again and annotate it. And students might not know what annotating is, but they certainly know what like doodling, underlining, circling, writing in the margins, and all that is. Oh, that's annotating. And I make my college students at MTSU do this too, because they need to learn that you are interacting with a text when you read it. So show us what you are doing. And then I say, that is your metacognition. And they're like, what? So first of all, read it silently. And then when you're going through and annotating it, you can talk to the text. You can talk to your partner and talk to the text and write down the kinds of things that you all think out loud. But just practice some close reading skills. First of all, a sourcing question. What is the purpose of this document? Why does it even exist?
I think they're like petitioning the government for the right to have equality and their reasoning behind it.
Okay, yes. Here's a nationally articulated statement that, you can't ignore it. If you do ignore it, it'll be conspicuous. Okay, so yes, that women should be allowed equal rights. Now, what are the kinds of things that you all noted in your annotations?
They took raising right from the Declaration of Independence.
Big time. And I can't just hop on the website right now and pull up the Declaration of Independence, but you should do that with your students. If you don't already do that, which you probably do, and be like, it's practically the same thing. So what are they doing here?
You're going to something that's familiar to everybody.
It's familiar, and I'm sorry?
It's already been signed, it's already been
Yes, it's definitely already been agreed upon. It's a founding document. And why, it's kind of like what Abigail Adams did. Why is this smart? Yes. These are the values our country was founded on. We're using your own words against you to show you that you're not living up to this, right? It's kind of like how we always, talk about Thomas Jefferson. I like to refer to him as TJ. Here he is talking about all men should be created equal, and of course we all know that he was a slaveholder. And so this is kind of like, well, maybe the Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal, but one thing that's noted in this timeline is that when the United States Constitution is written, it uses persons and people. It uses those words that could be talking about men and women. of course, before the Constitution's even written, all states pass laws which take away women's rights to vote. So, thus begins. So, yes, this is very much taken from the Declaration, just lifted right out of Declaration of Independence, but with very, very significant changes. So who would be, going back to Abigail Adams, she knew what she was talking about, who would be the aggressors or the tyrants in this situation? Yeah, the white men. Let's say the white men because they're the ones who can vote. Yes, the government, because some white men were actually at this convention, right? So not all white men. # whatever. Okay, so yes, so tell me some of the other things that y'all picked out in your annotations. I know you underlined and circled things.
We talked a lot about line 12 through 14. The all experience has shown that mankind to accustomed, and we were talking about racism in 2019 and how, or domestic abuse with women, and how it's just so easy to get into the habit of suffering because it's easier than standing up for yourself or changing, and how this just carries through women's suffrage, not through just voting, but through domestic abuse and through sexism and through pain and through these massive issues that are still evident today in 2019.
Right. Because some of the people who are suffering, they're just surviving, right? And so it's up to the people who have more resources to actually not just survive, but okay, well we have to do something about it, or else, it's amazing the extent to which people will be complacent.
It speaks that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are suffered and to right. That, kind of let, sometimes you allow it, even though you know it, instead of speaking out, instead of writing, instead of fixing it, you just, well, that's the way it is.
It's what we tell our kids about bullying. The kids will
bullying?
Yeah.
And bullying, okay.
Sorry. But it's suffering to be able to be called their friend because it's easier than saying, hey, you're wrong. It's the same. Right, it's easier to suffer. And
it is hard to stick your neck out. It is hard to be, especially if you're the one in the vulnerable position, right? It is so hard to speak out for what you know is right. That's why we make heroes out of the people who do that, because we all wish we could, right?
it's like calling upon their conscience. Listen to them.
Yes, this is definitely an argument with moral force. And if you're going to do anything in the 19th century, you better be morally right, because that is very much the discourse in which American politics is spoken.
It's like whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of those who suffer from it to refuse allegiance.
I know, and this is like Abigail Adams saying, we have the right to foment a rebellion of our own because you just said that we could, because you're doing the same thing. So be careful what you say you are allowed to do, because we ought to be allowed to do it too. And of course, 1848, this is when Southerners are deathly afraid of slave rebellions. So I wonder if they're even thinking about the women rebelling.
So this would be double, because you mentioned that Frederick Douglass was there as well.
Mm-hmm.
This would be sort of a double,
Right.
both for women and for abolishing slavery as well.
You are challenging the very foundation of these power structures. And that is going to, scare people in power in such a way that they're going to hold on to it even harder, right? Okay, anything else that you want to pull out in here? Now, I like, at the very last line, you're driving us to this. You are driving us to this, and, so it's necessary for us to now demand the equal station to which they are entitled. So that's interesting. It's like we are entitled to this. You just have been keeping it from us. They're not asking for something that they think they did not originally have. And so that's an interesting claim that, you know, this is a case of you're blocking our equal right instead of please give us equal rights. Okay. Now, that's just a match to the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. And now a lot of your students think the preamble is all there is to the Declaration of Independence, but you know that that's just the preamble. It's not the main body. The main body is all the grievances. So they're not done either. They've got some grievances, and now you are going to read some grievances. Okay, so this is a front and back. Read it all the way through, and then I'm going to assign each table a certain number of numbers that you will kind of focus on and report out. Okay, so the first 3 grievances. The lesson asks students to summarize their item and explain why they think this item was included. That's what your students will be doing with these. So summarize what your grievances are and why are they in here.
Yes, the first 3 are, we feel like probably, even though we can't necessarily see the parallels in the Declaration, that it is drawing the parallel between their representation in Parliament from the Declaration. So it is saying that they're having to follow laws or having to be a part of society that they have no voice in, basically.
Okay, so it's, they have to follow laws, but they don't have any voice. They're not represented.
Right. They can't vote. They can't do anything like that.
Yeah. Again, very reminiscent of the Declaration of Independence. Yeah. Okay, the next 3, 4, 5, and 6. What are those? I mean, they're not supposed to all come in like groups of 3, so you may not be able to summarize all of them in one statement, but
several things we talked about how on this timeline is where I was like connecting with, because in 1768 it says American colonies base their laws on the English common law about like men and women when they get married, they are a legal existence of one human, and like women are suspended during their marriage. It's like you have no say, and that's what those declarations were saying.
And even suspended in the sense that if this goes as far as like, if they commit a crime, like it falls on the husband more so than the wife. They can commit many crimes of impunity provided that they be done in the presence of their husband.
okay, so basically women are kind of stripped of personhood because they're directly, not just under the responsibility of their husbands, but they don't even have autonomy. They are just kind of an appendage to their husband's life. And so it's interesting that these, the black codes that were mentioned before, a woman has to be attached to a man to make the state not have to be responsible for her. They're putting it all on the men, even if their wives commit crimes. And so it's the idea that, she couldn't possibly do that on her own, which is, of course, patronizing because it's that kind of society. She's not even doesn't even have her own sense of responsibility. So how,
It's like as a child, you know what I mean?
Yes, very much. They're treated like children. Okay, so it's 4, 5, 6. So 7, 8, and 9, right?
So 7 kind of basically just talks about divorce and about how they have no power in the creation of the laws of divorce.
Okay.
Do they have any power after the divorce? Who the children go to, and their happiness is completely devoid.
Right, so they have no power in marriage, and they have no power in divorce. But if you don't even have any control over where your kids go, and if you don't have the power to even get your kids, then you would definitely not really want to seek the divorce. So,
Well, it's almost better to stay married.
well, even women nowadays who have the power to do what they want after divorce still will stay in marriage because the kids.
So that man was supreme, and they knew it. They knew what was best in all situations. Given, all the power was in their hands. So I asked, what year was this again? It was 1848. As they were saying, they were going through this. This is what they were seeing. You look at it now and you see that some of this is different, but they were going through this at the time. They were actually experiencing these deprivations at the time.
All right, so that was 7, 8, and 9. So we're at 10, 11, 12. I always think it's interesting how groups elect who's going to speak out.
I was probably going to say,
There's kind of a theme between 10, 11, and 12 about exclusion from government and influence.
Okay.
So it says, you can't be a doctor, you can't be a lawyer, you can't be all those things, but you also can't get any education, and then you don't have any position of authority within the church or theology either.
Yeah.
So you're refused access.
Yeah. So, I mean, even nowadays we talk about women breaking the glass ceiling. And so how hard it is for women to get those kinds of jobs that are, represent the most kind of power in our society. So yeah, this is 150 some odd years later, and we're still having some of these arguments. So yes, just think about how much more, they couldn't be doctors, they couldn't be anything that a man would kind of be bound to respect. Okay, so that's.
I told him about number 12. He allows her in church as well as state, but a subordinate position, claiming apostolic authority for her exclusion from the ministry. And the first thing that came to my mind was going to some of these churches, and if a woman has to say something, she cannot go up in the pulpit. She has to speak from the floor. So it still exists today. So that's the point that I'm getting at, I guess. So.
Yes, and so this is interesting too, because it's not just a social or political reason. It's God says you can't do this, basically. The authority of the church.
Right, and recently, probably in the last 25 maybe so years, where women are now leading congregations. And in some places, men have a problem with that.
Oh, yeah.
But my thing is, hell, if you can help me with my life, I don't give a damn if it come from a man or a woman. That's my position.
But I mean, even in the Episcopalian Church and Catholic Church, the idea of women having the kind of spiritual authority over, a congregation that could include men, that's still not allowed, in Episcopalian churches maybe because they're Catholic light, but yeah, in the Catholic Church can't do that. Even though you can pray to Mary, Mother of God, and and all the female saints, you can't have a woman priest.
I want to ask a question when we finish with all these.
Oh, okay. Question, and then we'll do the. Which one? Number 12? Okay.
Because all these others are something that the government could do something with.
Yeah.
This one, the government can't.
No, but the same kind of people who are in charge of the government are also going to be the people who are, in charge of churches.
The government can't do that because of
Right. This is not something that can be achieved by political means. But yeah, and of course this is women saying we have no outlet. So not even within the church. And you guys are claiming, that, this whole structure is based on a religious one with man at the top.
Also justify their position because they reference it back to God.
Yeah.
We're endowed by our Creator, and God says it's allowed, God says it's allowed, so.
Yes. Okay, so the last three.
Well, number 13 kind of takes the shift away from the professional and the theological standpoint and puts it on a moral basis.
Right.
It says that women and men are judged differently even if we do the same thing.
Right, double standard, double standard.
And then 14 goes on and talks about, it goes back to the reference to the church. That he has, claiming that God himself has reassigned her, okay? Number 15 struck me as the one that was most devastating to the woman.
Yeah.
Saying that the man has destroyed her confidence and her own power. So number 15 kind of says that even if I want to do all these other things that I have talked about before this one, you have destroyed me to a point where I can't accomplish it. Because you have put me in a position where I don't think I'm able to do these things, even though these are things that I should be able to do.
Well, and that's the thing. Because of this kind of society, women have internalized that patriarchal power structure. And so, you know, this is one reason why you have women against women's rights to vote, and why you have women against the idea of a woman president. And I'm not saying that everybody's drunk the Kool-Aid, I'm just saying that people internalize these in different ways and hold on to them for different reasons. And so it's like, you know, we can't, it's going to be so hard for us to actually get to the point where we feel as confident as you do. And even nowadays, women, you know, boys and girls are socialized differently. Girls are not taught to speak out. Boys are, you know, and so it's lots of things still lingering on. Yes.
And then I'm glad he brought that up. And I'm kind of going in a different direction with this whole thing. And I like doing this in my class just to get the juices going.
Get the juices
going. But can we say that this is a point of origin for domestic abuse? Not necessarily physical. He just said he can destroy all his confidence. Mental is worse than physical. I mean, that's on another whole, but I'm just asking because I like to stir the pot sometimes.
Well, I mean, I think it very much relates to that. I don't think that there's any, like, I mean, I think domestic abuse is as old as, like, domesticity itself. And so this is, yes, you have mentally put us in a place where our agency is crippled. You know, our confidence has been damaged. And I mean, if you saw a parent do that to a daughter today, you would be like, I'm going to call DCS. So that is recognized, if it's severe enough, as like legally actionable abuse. So yeah, I think that, you know, is something they're doing. They're saying, hey, abuse, you guys have done this to us. But yet these women still have the wherewithal to like see what it is they can do. Yes.
I think it would fall under both. Mental, domestic, but physical also, because when you go back to number 6, it talked about even to administer chastisement.
Yeah.
And they felt, you know, there were men felt like if you messed up as a female, then they had to take care of you, deal with you. You know, and I'm not advocating it. It was going on at that time. And so they had, you know, these ladies were brave enough to speak out against, but, you know, some people at that time were like, well, that's, you know, he's my husband, he's
Right, especially if that one about women, even if they commit a crime. I mean, you're putting husbands in charge of punishment instead of the legal system in charge of punishment. So, you know, the husband is, yeah. And then you know what happens when you give that much power to one person over another person? It can take the nicest person and turn them into bad one.
All men would be tyrants.
Exactly. Well, we do have a few minutes, so I am going to pass out the last excerpt. And this is the end of the Declaration. So they're summing everything up, and this is where they also list the names. Now, the Today in History article says that this was read out at the convention, and so that people could debate it and vote on it and sign their names to it. So that way, you know, you're like, well, this isn't just a splinter group. This is something that everybody at this convention thought really best represented our thoughts on this. What are they saying here? How are they summing up their arguments? Because of course, you know, you have your opening statement, you have the facts, which is what of course you have to base every argument on, and then the summary and the restatement of purpose.
It just looks like they're saying, this is how it's gonna be, deal with it. You know.
Yeah. This is
we're
what's
making
coming.
it- We're, right, that's
Yeah.
what it seemed to me, you know. Just know we're here.
All right, so it's very forceful.
We've made our grievances and our
Yeah.
complaints, and now we're going to go about doing things to make sure that, you know, our complaints, our voice is heard publicly, and we're going to employ every opportunity, every agent that we can in order to make it happen. And they even, one thing I caught, they said we even anticipate that there's going to be some negative
Oh,
or
yeah. Oh, of
false
course.
interpretation that come out of this meeting. You hear a lot of things that are said to put, try to tear down and take away from what we're setting out to do.
Right, so it's not just that we are producing this document and signing our names to it, but this is just the beginning for us. We are now going to be lobbying for these things, and we anticipate opposition and we're ready for it. So very resolute. Any other thoughts?
I see 32 men put placed there, the actual, to say that this is not just a group.
Yeah, right. It's not even just like a token man. It's like almost half as many people. Yeah, half as many men as women. And these men, they're sticking their necks out too in this.
So my question is, what is the perception of these men that agree with these women? Because,
Right.
you know, we into this macho thing. So, you know, how will the general population deal with the men that agree with the women?
Well, I imagine that a lot of these people really just kind of circulate in elite circles, and they're used to being among like-minded people. So I wonder the extent to which they're going to be experiencing, you know, black. And also, how does this get out, and who actually reads this?